WOCA.
Ocala.
All right, 20 minutes before 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. I don't know this for a fact, but I'm guessing that a lot of guys, maybe some women, who do what I do and work in radio probably didn't see this as their career in the beginning. They probably thought they were going to be the next rock star or I think a lot of us were in music before we got into radio, and probably is the path we took. So real quick, I want to tell you something about 1970. I was 15 years old, 15. And I went into New York City with a friend. This friend, I've told you about him before, Robin. He used to love going to record stores.
Yeah.
And he would find the most obscure record stores of anything. But this particular day, we went to like a mainstream record store, and I think it was in Times Square. And there was some large posters. Posters were pretty popular back then. Large posters. Remember that? Psychedelic posters, etc.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a poster of Janis Joplin. And I remember looking at it, not knowing who she was. I remembered that she had been in Woodstock. Not that I had gone. I was too young for any of that, and my dad wouldn't have let me go to Woodstock, I'm sure. But anyway, in fact, my dad probably didn't want me in the city at all. But we were on the train going back home, and somehow word got to us that Janis Joplin had died. It was like, wow. We just saw her picture, It was like, well, we just saw her. She was doing okay. And for some reason, her passing resonated with everybody. Everybody I knew. It was like the whole world suddenly was crushed because this woman had died. And while I didn't know anything about her music at that point, it's obviously she had an impact on the world. And why? I guess we'll have to ask God one day if we ever get the chance. What the heck was it with Janis Joplin or some celebrities when they die? In fact, I don't know, John Byrne Cooke is going to maybe correct me if I say this and he doesn't agree, but maybe she became more of a household name after she died. I don't know. She seemed like the kind of lady I would have liked to get to know. John Byrne Cooke looks like the kind of guy I would have liked to have hung out with.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw a photo of him in the book. The book is called On the Road with Janis Joplin. He wrote this book. We're going to talk about it. There's a photo of him playing with Joni Mitchell and oh gosh, I can't remember that. And Jody. Judy Collins.
Yeah, that's it.
And who's the other one? Yeah. So Jody Mitchell, Judy Collins, and
oh gosh.
Oh, never mind. He'll help us out with this. Joan Baez, thank you. There he is. John Byrne Cooke. You were Janis Joplin's road manager from 1967 until that day that I was on the train, October 4th, 1970. I couldn't have told you that, except it's in my notes. She was just 27. How old were you at that time, John?
I was 29 going on 30. The next day was my 30th birthday.
Is that right? Wow. So how did you get that job? How did that happen for you?
I was involved in the folk boom, in the folk revival of the early 60s. I was in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I was playing with a bluegrass and old-time group called the Charles River Valley Boys. And it was a small community in those days. I mean, we knew the folks in Greenwich Village. We knew some people in Berkeley. There were sort of these little centers across the country, and somehow we knew each other. And I knew Albert Grossman, who was the manager for Bob Dylan. I knew Bob Dylan when he was, one man and a guitar singing incredible songs.
Wow.
And Janis and Big Brother and a lot of other people had a very great time in June 1967 at the Monterey International Pop Festival. And Janis and Big Brother made a sensational appearance. And a few months later, Albert Grossman signed to manage the band, and he hired me to road manage them.
Wow! And you had no idea. You had no idea you were doing something so historical.
Absolutely not. It was getting by from day to day. I mean, I had a still camera, and a couple of months into the tour, I bought a movie camera. Now, of course, I look back and I wish I'd shot a roll of still photographs for every frame that I took, and many more reels of movie film.
So, were you at Woodstock?
Yes, we were at Woodstock, too, 2 years after Monterey.
Wow. That must have been pretty exciting. I can remember that really clearly. Do you know what I wonder often? I wonder if Janis Joplin would have been kicked off the stage by Simon, that guy from the talent show on
the
TV.
American Idol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I often, and Bob Dylan, would these greats have been kicked off the stage by those guys?
I don't know. You know, they had a way of getting to people and reaching them. It's very hard to imagine, you know, Janis appearing as a contestant
Yeah.
on American Idol or anything. We didn't have any shows like that.
Well, then let me ask it another way. Do you think we could ever see another movement where kids with guitars singing with a harmonica strapped to the neck could ever catapult to stardom? Do you think we could ever do that again?
You know, it's hard to imagine, because what was different about those days was I was in high school when people like the Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis and the Everly Brothers came along, and some of those performers were fairly young, but they weren't us. They were from another part of the country,
Yeah.
and at that time we didn't think we could become them. But what happened through the folk music movement, which was big, but still it wasn't mainstream popular music. And then in the middle 60s, it evolved into folk rock and roll, and these groups like the Mamas and the Papas, Simon and Garfunkel, people that we knew, those of us in the off the radar, non-mainstream music, began to get national notice, and it was called, especially the San Francisco bands and the early rock and roll of the latter 60s, was countercultural. It wasn't part of the mainstream culture. And those bands, Janis and Big Brother, you know, there was this ethic that lasted for a couple of years in San Francisco. We're not in it for the money. It's not about stars. We're in it for playing the music and making contact with the kids.
Yeah.
And then when the big record labels started signing these acts, there was a process that happened, and all of a sudden the rock and roll became mainstream. It's hard to imagine a form of music emerging, but I suppose it could, where kids with guitars are playing something quite different, and then it rises to be something big. But well, they say history repeats itself. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, well, and I don't mean to be so pessimistic. It just seems like it was a magical time. But I want to ask you this: was there somebody? I'm going to use the word status quo. I don't even know if I'm using it in the right way, but was there somebody in the status quo, like an Ed Sullivan, that was able to see beyond the confines of what he was a part of, so that he could see the up and coming greats? I mean, he seemed to be, but I don't know. Were there any others? Was Dick Cavett maybe was one, right?
Well, I was just about to say, if you had, and Sullivan, yeah, I mean, you know, you look at him and we all thought he's a total square, and yet he's the guy. Had the Beatles on, you know, a day or two after they landed at the airport. There they are in Ed Sullivan, and they're overnight stars in the United States and the world.
Yeah.
And Cavett certainly, you know, had an ear for things that interested him, and he wasn't so concerned with whether they were mainstream and yet acceptable to everybody. I'll tell you an interesting story about Cavett and Janis. She was asked to be on other evening shows, but she chose to be only on Cavett, I think either 3 or 4 times. And what she said was, I like him because he actually listens to his guests.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that.
I still love Dick Cavett. Yeah. Well, we need to take a little break, and this is my world, by the way. I love this world that we're in right now. I want to know about your music too, John. And the book is awesome. On the Road with Janis Ian, John, Byrne, Cooke.
Janis Joplin.
What did I say?
Janis Ian.
Janis Ian, did I say?
Yeah.
Janis Joplin.
That's
I'm sorry. Did I say? Did I say Janis Ian? Wow. I love Janis Ian too. All right, on the Road with Janis Joplin, John, Byrne, Cooke. All right, we'll take a little break and we'll be right back. This is The Source, WOCA.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accident. It'll be partly sunny today and not as warm as recent days with lowering humidity, highs in the 70s. Partly cloudy tonight, lows ranging from the upper 40s in the coldest inland spots to about 60 along the coast. Tomorrow, increasing clouds, highs in the 70s. We'll see periods of rain and a thunderstorm tomorrow night. Then for Sunday, mostly cloudy with occasional rain and a thunderstorm, highs in the upper 60s to low 70s. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Joe Lundberg.
Your home is safe. Or is it? AA Lock, Dock, and Security. The name has been a staple in Ocala since 1985. Do you have the right equipment in place to have peace of mind when you are at home or away? AA Lock, Dock, and Security has the right people to install and monitor your home or business. Call today for a free on-site security analysis. Call 867-1965. AA Lock, Dock, and Security, 219 Northwest 10th Street, 867-1965.
Who would you feed if you had 50 chicken sandwiches from Chick-fil-A? WOCA and Chick-fil-A in the Paddock Mall have teamed up to reward one organization with 50 chicken sandwiches as a way of saying thanks for the great work that organization is doing in our community. And we need your help. See, there are so many great people doing great things that we need nominations. You can nominate your own organization or any organization you choose. Simply send an email to WOCA@WOCA.com. And in 350 words or less, tell us why the organization you are nominating should receive 50 free chicken sandwiches from WOCA and Chick-fil-A at the Paddock Mall. We'll review your nominations and then select one deserving organization each month. We'll announce the winner and even read the winning entry on the air. Make sure to include the contact name and phone number of the organization that you are nominating. And thanks from your friends at WOCA and Chick-fil-A in the Paddock Mall.
All right, I couldn't wait for those commercials to be done quick enough. All right, John Byrne Cooke is on the phone. He was Janis Joplin's road manager from 1967 until she died on October 4th of 1970 at the age of 27. He himself an accomplished photographer, a performing musician, and he kind of looks like one of the mamas in the Papas. He looks like a tall guy, in other words.
Yeah.
He's a filmmaker. He writes book reviews for the New York Times, the Washington Post, Book World, and the Los Angeles Times, and obviously a very talented person in his own right. And his book is called On the Road with Janis Joplin. Somebody else was on the road with Janis, Ian. I don't know who was on the road. The Big Brother and the Holding Company. This was one of those bands where the singer really outshined the band. Those guys didn't stand a chance. No offense to them. And obviously they supported her. But gosh, sometimes this just happens and there's nothing you can do about it.
Well, you have to give Big Brother a lot of credit. That band existed before Janis joined them. They were one of the bands that sprang up in San Francisco in the mid-'60s, and we were hearing about them from a long way away. All we knew was these bands with the funny names, Big Brother and the Holding Company, Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane. And they took Janis in when they'd been playing for about 6 months. A fellow who was instrumental in helping form that band was a Texan, and he knew Janis, and he thought it might be interesting to put a female singer inside this rock and roll band. But what you have to give them is that they had a unique sound, and that Janis, remember, Janis was being powered by that band when she made her stunning impression at the Monterey Pop Festival. It's that band that's on the Cheap Thrills album, which went gold within a few days of being issued in August of 1968. And she loved those boys. It was a difficult decision for her to leave Big Brother, but I think she saw a bigger challenge, which was to try and go out as a solo artist and take the spotlight by herself.
Were you able to have intimate time with her? I don't necessarily mean sexual, but I mean just like two people having coffee together. Did you have that kind of relationship with her?
Sometimes. There was, life on the road was busy. The first time we really went out together to do something just for the fun of it was we were in Los Angeles, and the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey had been released, and we went and saw a matinee together. We went out and had breakfast. Well, it was a late breakfast. It was like midday breakfast, and we saw a matinee. We saw the movie at the Cinerama Dome in Los Angeles, certainly one of the biggest screens in the country at the time. And then we went and had drinks afterwards, and the thing that we thought was it looked like the space program, that those future parts of that film were being run by squares, and we didn't want it to be run by squares. We wanted people who were a little hipper to be.
That's too funny. So if I'm crossing that line between what an interviewer should ask and what he shouldn't ask, forgive me, but did you have a relationship with her, a romantic relationship?
No, I did not, but Janis wouldn't work with anybody that wasn't a close friend, and there's an element of love in all friendship.
Yeah,
and I certainly
right.
loved her. You know, she wanted to be, she and the boys in Big Brother loved each other. That was the thing that was ultimately lacking in the first band that she put together when she tried to go off on her own, the Cosmic Blues Band. Never gelled as a group, but she didn't feel that kind of personal connection with all of the musicians, and she did feel it in her last year with the band that she had a much more active role in assembling with her manager, Albert Grossman, the Full Tilt Boogie Band, which is the band on the Pearl album. The tour in the summer of 1970 was just a pure joy with her because once again she had that feeling of being, very close with the folks that she was working with.
So what do we think we know about Janis Joplin that you want to set the record straight about?
Well, what we know, we all know that she was a dynamic personality on stage, that she was a singer like no other, that she really grabbed you and made the song, she did what a great singer does, which is to involve you in the emotional content of the song. And Janis didn't just involve you, she just took hold of you and made you feel it. The things that we don't know so much about her that I think for me are really important and round out her personality is that she was very smart and she was often very funny. And those are the things that you don't necessarily see on stage when she's singing her heart out.
Yeah.
But she was very quick, and her intelligence and her, especially her articulateness came very much into play in the last year of her life, most important in forming a relationship with the record producer of the Pearl album, Paul Rothchild, that she had really not had with the producers of the Cheap Thrills album with Big Brother and with the Cosmic Blues album. She wasn't really satisfied with those relationships, and with Paul Rothchild, it wasn't just about the Pearl album. He was enabling her to look forward to working with him on future albums and enabling her to think for the first time, truly, that she wasn't bound to blow her voice out because she refused to give anything less than everything she had to the song. But Paul was, because of their ability to communicate, and he was a very similar intelligence, very quick with words, and he learned how to speak to every musician that he worked with. With Janis, it was not a chore because she was much like him in her quick intelligence and articulate abilities. And they were talking about how to use her voice, different parts of the range, the different way of singing on stage and in recording. And she was beginning to see a longer future with her voice than she had imagined. She really believed she was just bound to blow it out, and she said, "I'll buy a bar in Marin County and settle down."
I love the part in the book where the person called Snooky said that this is a horn band, and when people think of rock and roll, you think of guitars and drums, but horns do play an integral part.
Yeah, well, Janis loved the R&B sound, rhythm and blues, and what she was trying to do in the Cosmic Blues Band, she had talked to the guys in Big Brother about adding horns and or a keyboard to that band, and a couple of the guys were willing, a couple of the guys weren't. It never happened. So the Cosmic Blues Band had horns and a keyboard, an organ, and she didn't want to imitate R&B. She wanted to evoke it and do something more. And she was never really able to articulate exactly what that was and to be a band leader in a way that would enable the musicians to find the groove that she was looking for. But Snooky's addition helped that band quite a lot. He joined us fairly shortly before we went to Europe in April 1969. And I wish everybody in America could have seen and heard that tour because it was something about being overseas as a group of American musicians in England and Europe. And not so many people toured nearly so often overseas in those days. And the band really came together over there. We played 5 capitals plus Frankfurt, Germany. And for that short period, the band was everything she hoped for, but it couldn't hold together like that when we came back to the States.
Did you play with them?
Did I play?
Yeah.
No, I had been a bluegrass and old-time musician with a band in Cambridge, Massachusetts called the Charles River Valley Boys, but I wasn't one of the folk musicians who plugged in as the evolution to folk rock and roll happened. and I was looking for what I was going to do with the rest of my life, and I took road managing actually as a transitional job. I knew I'd travel a lot and meet a lot of people and see a lot of possibilities, but I stayed with Janis because I loved and respected her, and I wanted to help her keep on doing what she was trying to do.
So the road managers of today, they're usually at the hotels and the venues like a half a year before the artist is ever there. Was that the way it was for you back then?
No, there was no pool of experienced candidates. Albert Grossman, Bob Dylan's manager, and then later Janis's manager, was the first guy to give a road manager to a folk musician, and this is why while Bob Dylan was still a solo artist, he had a road manager who drove the car and collected the money, and all Bob had to do was go out on stage and play the music, and we thought that was remarkable. And at the time that Albert Grossman signed Big Brother and the Holding Company, he hired me to road manage them, not because he knew that I knew how to do it. He thought I was somebody who could figure out how to do it.
John, we're up against the clock. Well, I am just so enthralled with this conversation. I'm honored that you have been on our show. On the Road with Janis Joplin is the book. I have a copy here. Call me if you want. I don't really want to give it away, but I will. The rest of us have to go buy it. I've got 10 seconds, John. Give me a website.
JohnByrneCooke.com. That's JohnByrne, and Cooke with an E.com is my website. And there's a page on there about this book.
Thank you so much, John. That was great. We'll be right back.
The president and congressional leaders today, some sticking points like immigration could be causing some indigestion.
Republicans warning the president not to go forward with his plan to implement some of the immigration reforms the House has refused by executive order. House Speaker John Boehner's warning if you play with matches, Mr. President, you're going to get burned. But the White House says a majority of the country, in fact, the majority of Congress, supports those reforms.
Fox's Wendell Goler. A Japanese company is accused of